I always believed we had the perfect marriage. From the outside looking in, it certainly seemed that way. I met Laura in college. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. Beautiful, intelligent, charming in that effortless way that made everyone gravitate toward her. I fell hard and fast, and to my luck, she fell just as hard for me. Or at least, I thought she did. We married young, built our lives together from scratch. Through years of hard work, I built a successful career in finance, while she pursued a passion for interior design, turning our house into a home filled with warmth and style. We had what seemed like the ideal life, a stable marriage, 3 wonderful children, a beautiful home, and enough financial security to live comfortably. I never once questioned it. I never once doubted her. Laura was everything a man could want in a wife. She was affectionate, supportive, and had a way of making life feel easy. We were partners in every sense, or at least, that's what I believed. I worked long hours to provide for our family, and she managed the home, taking care of our children with a patience and devotion that only deepened my admiration for her. She was the perfect mother, the kind of woman who attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, who baked cookies for the neighbors and volunteered at charities. The kind of woman no one would suspect of anything sinister. Looking back now, I can see the cracks, the tiny fissures in the foundation of our marriage that I was too blind to notice. I was so caught up in my own world, in the responsibilities of being a husband and father, that I never stopped to question whether she was truly happy. I took for granted that she was. After all, wasn't I doing everything right? I was faithful, I provided for her, I never raised my voice or put her through any hardship. I thought I was the kind of man any woman would be lucky to have. It never crossed my mind that luck had nothing to do with it. For 15 years, Laura carried a secret life within our marriage. She played the role of devoted wife flawlessly, never once slipping, never once letting on that the love I thought we shared had been a carefully constructed illusion. I had no reason to suspect, no evidence to question. I trusted her implicitly, believed in the sanctity of our vows, in the promise we made to each other all those years ago. She was my wife. The mother of my children. How could I have ever imagined she was capable of such deceit? But the truth doesn't care about what we can or cannot imagine. The truth simply waits, buried beneath years of lies, waiting for the moment it can no longer be contained. Time has a way of distorting reality. When I look back now, I wonder how many moments I misinterpreted, how many warning signs I dismissed as ordinary. The late nights, the sudden interest in dressing up even when she wasn't going anywhere special, the occasional distance in her eyes when I spoke. They were all there, scattered throughout the years like pieces of a puzzle I never thought to put together. But at the time, they were nothing more than fleeting thoughts, easy to ignore in the grand picture of what I believed was a happy life. Our home was warm and filled with love, at least, it was for me. Laura had a way of making things feel effortless, of maintaining a rhythm that made life seem beautifully predictable. Mornings were chaotic with the children, breakfasts being rushed, school bags being packed, last-minute reminders shouted across the house. Evenings were calmer, with family dinners where we all gathered around the table, laughter filling the space as we shared stories from our day. I cherished those moments, held on to them as proof that I had built something real, something worth holding on to. Our 3 children, Ethan, Lily, and Ben, were my greatest joy. I saw pieces of myself in them, in the way Ethan carried himself with quiet confidence, in Lily's sharp intellect, in Ben's relentless curiosity. I loved them with every fiber of my being, and every time I looked at them, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life Laura and I had created together. I thought we were a team, a unit bound by love and loyalty. I never once considered that their existence, their very presence, might be the cruelest deception of all. Laura and I had a rhythm, a routine we rarely deviated from. I worked long hours, leaving early and coming home late, while she handled everything at home. It was a balance we both accepted, or so I thought. I took comfort in the normalcy of it all, in the reliability of our life. I never thought to question what she did during the hours I wasn't there, never imagined that the trust one had in her was being exploited in the worst possible way. There were moments, small, insignificant at the time, that should have made me pause. The times she seemed distracted, her phone never far from her reach. The way she would disappear for hours under the guise of running errands, always having a perfect excuse when I asked. The times she turned away from me in bed, claiming exhaustion. I brushed them off, attributing them to the natural ebb and flow of marriage. I loved her. I trusted her. And trust, I learned too late, is the easiest thing in the world to manipulate. 15 years. That's how long she maintained the lie. 15 years of sharing my home, my bed, my life, while carrying a secret that would one day rip everything apart. 15 years of deception so masterfully woven that I never saw it unraveling beneath me. If there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: Laura was a woman capable of incredible love. I just never realized that love had never truly belonged to me. The years passed in a blur, each one reinforcing the illusion of stability. I measured time in milestones: Ethan's first day of school, Lily's first piano recital, Ben losing his first tooth. We were a family, woven together by shared memories and the belief that nothing could break us apart. And yet, the cracks had always been there, invisible to me but glaringly obvious in hindsight. Looking back, I wonder if Laura ever felt guilty. If she ever lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling beside me, knowing that every word she spoke, every touch she gave, was built on a lie. Did she ever hesitate before kissing me goodbye, before looking me in the eyes and telling me she loved me? Or had the deception become second nature, so deeply ingrained that even she believed it? I remember moments when I caught something fleeting in her expression, hesitation, maybe even sadness. There were times when she'd stare at me just a little too long, as if searching for something. I always assumed it was love, that she was simply admiring the man she had built a life with. I never imagined it was regret. I never considered that maybe, for brief moments, she wished she had chosen differently. But then there were other times when she was more radiant than ever, as if something inside her had been reignited. She glowed with an energy I hadn't seen since our early years together, laughing more freely, touching me absent-mindedly as we passed in the hallway. I foolishly thought it was happiness, that we had reached a point in our marriage where comfort and love had settled into something effortless. I was wrong. The truth was, she was living a double life, balancing between the world we had built together and the secret existence she had carved out for herself. And I, in my blind devotion, had never noticed the difference. There were times when she was inexplicably absent, weekend trips to visit old friends, late-night meetings for the charity she volunteered at. She always had a reason, always reassured me with a smile and a kiss before walking out the door. I never questioned it, never saw the need to. Why would I? We trusted each other. At least I trusted her. 15 years of deception should have left clues, missteps, forgotten lies, inconsistencies that should have made me question. But Laura was meticulous. She was careful. She knew how to weave the perfect alibi, how to keep her world separate without ever raising suspicion. And I was the fool who never saw it coming. I remember one evening in particular, about 5 years ago. It was late, the kids had gone to bed, and she was in the kitchen, humming softly as she wiped down the counters. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed the side of her neck. She stiffened, just for a moment, just enough for me to notice. When I pulled back to look at her, she forced a smile, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't quite place. "Just tired," she had said, turning back to her task. I believed her. That moment, like so many others, was lost in the routine of life. I let it go, pushed it aside, never once imagining that it had been a glimpse into something far darker. Never once considering that for 15 years, the woman I loved had been slipping through my fingers. And I had never even felt it happen. It started with small choices, ones that seemed insignificant at first. A glance held a second too long, a laugh that lingered, a touch that should have never happened. Laura had always been social, effortlessly charming in a way that made people drawn to her. I had never minded it before, had never felt the need to question the easy way she interacted with others. But then there was him. I don't know when exactly she let him in. Maybe it started as an innocent friendship, or maybe it was something she had been waiting for all along. All I know is that one day, there was nothing, and the next, she was his. It was easy to hide at first. He was someone from her world, someone who existed in the spaces I never occupied. A business connection, a fellow charity worker, a man who shared her interests in ways I never could. While I spent my days drowning in numbers and meetings, she found something different in him, something I was never even aware she had been searching for. Maybe it began as excitement, a rush of something new. A text message sent late at night, a private joke that only the two of them understood. I can picture it now, her phone lighting up in the darkness while I lay beside her, oblivious to the betrayal brewing just inches away. Did she hesitate before responding? Did she glance at me, sleeping soundly, before making the choice to reply? Or had it already become effortless by then, just another part of her routine? I wonder how long she fought against it, if she fought at all. If there were nights when she told herself she needed to stop, if she ever felt sick with guilt the way I would later feel sick with grief. But the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, slow and insidious, disguised as something harmless. And before you even realize it, you've crossed a line you can never uncross. The first time they were together, I was working late. I imagined she had already made up her mind by then, had already planned out every detail. She knew I wouldn't question it. She knew I would come home exhausted, kiss her goodnight, and fall into bed without a second thought. She knew I trusted her. And that was all she needed. I imagine it was exhilarating for her, those first few encounters. The stolen moments, the whispered promises, the thrill of secrecy. While I was working to build a future for our family, she was out there creating an entirely different life, one that didn't include me. Did she come home to me afterward, shower away the evidence, slip back into our bed like nothing had changed? Did she look at me the same way she always had, or was there a flicker of something new in her eyes, something I was too blind to recognize? For 15 years, she kept this hidden, perfecting the art of deception. 15 years of stolen hours, of careful lies, of living two lives at once. And I never saw it. I never even thought to look. The affair settled into the fabric of our lives so seamlessly that I never had a chance to question it. Laura was careful, methodical, ensuring that the deception blended into our routine without a ripple. She knew when to give me attention, when to play the role of the devoted wife, when to disappear just enough to avoid suspicion but not enough to raise alarm. It was a delicate balance, perfected over time. Looking back, I wonder how she justified it to herself. Did she convince herself that it wasn't hurting anyone? That as long as I never found out, our marriage was still intact? Or did she tell herself that I deserved it, that I had failed her in some unspoken way? Whatever the reasoning, it allowed her to live a double life for 15 years without hesitation. The cracks were there, but they were small, expertly hidden beneath the weight of our normalcy. There were nights when she was distant, where I would reach for her in bed only to find her body stiff, her responses mechanical. I chalked it up to stress, to exhaustion, to the natural ebbs and flows of marriage. After all, we had been together for so long. Wasn't it normal for passion to fade, for routine to take its place? Then there were the trips. The weekends away with her. Friends. The sudden work events, the charity retreats that always seemed to fall at the most inconvenient times. I never questioned them, never once assumed that there was something sinister lurking beneath the surface. Why would I? I had spent years believing in the woman beside me, in the vows we had made, in the life we had built together. I trusted her. And trust is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. She was strategic in her deception, ensuring that no trace of him ever reached our home. No strange phone calls, no unexpected messages. If she was texting him, it was done when I wasn't around. If she was with him, it was during the hours she knew I couldn't reach her. And if she ever felt guilt, she hid it well, tucking it away beneath bright smiles and effortless laughter. I wonder now how she looked at our children, knowing that each one of them was proof of her betrayal. Did she ever hesitate when saying, "I love you"? knowing that the man raising them was not their father? Did she ever feel the weight of what she had done, or had the years dulled her conscience? 15 years. A number that haunts me. I go over the timeline again and again in my mind, tracing back through the years, trying to pinpoint the exact moment where I lost her. Was it before our first child was born? Was it after? Had she ever truly been mine at all? The worst part is knowing that she didn't just betray me once. This wasn't a mistake, a moment of weakness, a single act of indiscretion. It was a choice, one that she made again and again, year after year, while looking me in the eye and telling me she loved me. I had given her everything. And in return, she had built an empire of lies, standing on the foundation of my blind devotion. But the thing about lies is that they can't stay buried forever. No matter how deep you hide them, the truth always finds a way to the surface. And when it did, it would destroy everything. Time has a way of making even the most unnatural things feel ordinary. What started as stolen moments and hidden guilt must have become routine for her. The secrecy, the lies, the deception, it all blended so seamlessly into our lives that I never saw the distortion in the reflection of our marriage. She was perfect in the way she carried it, so much so that even now, I struggle to pinpoint a single moment where she ever truly slipped. Laura was always one step ahead, careful to keep me in the dark while ensuring that I remained just satisfied enough to never question. If she felt guilt, she masked it well, turning it into affection, small gestures that made me believe she was still invested in us. Maybe on some level she was. Maybe she had convinced herself that as long as she played the role of a loving wife, the damage was contained. But there were nights, rare but present, where I could sense something was off. She would turn her back to me in bed, claiming exhaustion. Sometimes, when she thought I was asleep, I would hear the faintest sigh slip from her lips. Not the kind of sigh that comes from a woman at peace, but the kind that escapes when someone is suffocating under the weight of something they cannot share. I never pressed her. I never demanded to know what was wrong. Instead, I did what any trusting husband would do. I reassured her, held her close, told her she could talk to me about anything. And every time, she would kiss me softly and tell me she was just tired, that everything was fine. And I believed her. I go over those moments now, dissecting them with the precision of a man desperate to rewrite history. If I had asked the right questions, would she have broken? If I had looked her in the eyes a second longer, would I have seen the lie forming on her lips? Or was I always doomed to be blind to the truth, simply because I wanted so badly to believe in the woman I loved? I think about him sometimes, the man she chose over me. The man she allowed into her life, into her body, into the space that was supposed to belong only to us. Was he better than me? Did he give her something I never could? Or was it never about that at all? I wonder if he ever felt guilt, if he ever thought about the man he was betraying, the children who would one day be forced to bear the weight of their mother's choices. Or did he see me as nothing more than an obstacle, a footnote in the story of their love? For 15 years, they continued, weaving their affair into the fabric of my life without a single tear in the illusion. And for 15 years I was a fool, blissfully unaware that the foundation I had built my life on was nothing more than sand. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how well it's buried. And soon, I would come to understand just how deep the betrayal ran. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with realizing your entire life has been a lie. It is not like a sudden wound, sharp and fleeting. No, it is slow, creeping into your bones, wrapping itself around your mind like a vice. It is the pain of looking back on decades of memories and questioning every single one. The pain of knowing that love, trust, and family, everything I had built my life around, had been nothing more than a beautifully constructed illusion. I did not find out all at once. The truth did not come to me in some dramatic revelation, no sudden confessions, no suspicious text messages left open for me to see. It came in small moments, in whispers of doubt that grew louder over time. It started with a look. I remember it clearly, a moment so insignificant at the time that I almost forgot it. I had been in the kitchen, watching Laura across the room as she spoke with one of our neighbors. She was laughing, her eyes bright with something I couldn't quite place. And then, just for a second, her gaze flickered past me, past the room, past everything that existed between us. It was the kind of look someone gives when they are somewhere else entirely. It should have meant nothing. But it didn't. Something about it stuck with me, an itch at the back of my mind that refused to be ignored. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid. That I was reading too much into a simple glance. But the seed had been planted, and no matter how hard I tried to push it down, it began to grow. Once suspicion takes root, it is impossible to unsee the things you had been blind to before. Suddenly, the little inconsistencies, the ones I had always brushed off, felt like puzzle pieces clicking into place. The times she was unreachable, the unexplained absences, the way she had always been just a little too careful with her phone. Still, I did not want to believe it. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was poisoning my own mind with doubt. Laura was my wife. She was the mother of my children. We had spent decades together, building a life side by side. I could not accept that it had all been a lie. But the feeling would not go away. It followed me through the days, haunted me in the nights when I lay beside her, listening to her steady breathing and wondering who she was dreaming about. It twisted in my gut every time she left the house, every time her phone buzzed with a message she was too quick to dismiss. So I did something I never thought I would do. I started to watch. I paid attention in ways I never had before. I noted the calls she didn't answer when I was around, the vague explanations for her absences. I tested small things, asking about places she said she had been, watching the way her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. And little by little, the truth began to unravel before me. The woman I had loved for over 20 years was hiding something. And deep down, I already knew what it was. Denial is a powerful thing. Even as the weight of suspicion bore down on me, even as the evidence stacked higher with each passing day, I still clung to the hope that I was wrong. That I was imagining things. That Laura, my wife, the mother of my children, could never have done what my gut was telling me she had done. But the truth does not care about hope. The moment everything fell apart was not some dramatic confrontation. It was quiet, almost clinical in its execution. A simple decision, a test, and a truth so devastating it hollowed me out from the inside. The idea came to me in the dead of night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Laura slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady. The thought was intrusive, almost ridiculous, until it wasn't. Until it became the only thing I could focus on. A DNA test. It was absurd, wasn't it? To test my own children? To question something so fundamental, so certain? But once the idea had taken root, it refused to leave me. I started with Ethan, my eldest. It was simple enough, one of those at-home kits, easy, discreet. I told myself it was just to silence the voice in my head, to put my doubts to rest. A precaution, nothing more. The results came 2 weeks later. Ethan was not my son. I remember reading the words over and over, my mind refusing to process them. A 0% chance of paternity. The scientific certainty of my greatest nightmare staring back at me in black and white. I could have stopped there. I could have thrown the papers away, forced myself to believe it was a mistake, an anomaly. But I knew better. I knew what I had to do next. I tested Lily. Then Ben. And when their results came back, my world collapsed. Not one of them was mine. Not one. 3 children. 3 lives I had poured my soul into, raised as my own, loved with every ounce of my being. And not a single drop of my blood ran through their veins. The betrayal hit me in waves, each one worse than the last. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the years of deception. It was the depth of it. The sheer scale of the lie Laura had built around me. 15 years. 3 children. A lifetime stolen from me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything other than sit there, numb and shaking, as the truth settled into my bones. But I did nothing. Because there was nothing to be done. Nothing could change what had already been taken from me. And nothing could prepare Laura for what was coming next. Rage is an inadequate word for what I felt in the days after the results came in. It wasn't a fleeting anger, something that burned hot and quick before fading. It was deeper than that. It was cold, calculated, a fury so sharp it cut through me with surgical precision. Laura had taken everything from me. My trust. My love. My children. And now, I was going to take everything from her. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been too easy. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, the slow unraveling, the creeping realization that her world was about to crumble. I wanted her to wake up each morning without knowing that the ground beneath her feet was already splitting apart. The first thing I did was secure my assets. I met with a lawyer, one of the best in the state, and laid out everything. The infidelity. The paternity tests. The years of deception. And then I asked him one simple question. How do I ruin her? The answer was brutal in its simplicity. She had built her life with me, depended on me. Our house, our savings, the life she was so comfortable in, it was all tied to me. She hadn't worked in years, had no real career to fall back on. She had assumed, for 15 years, that I would always be there to provide for her. She was wrong. The lawsuit was the first blow. Fraud, deception, emotional damages. I threw everything at her. My lawyer assured me that with the evidence I had, the courts would favor me. The money, the property, everything we owned together, it would be mine. Next came the divorce papers. Served to her while she sat in our kitchen, sipping coffee, completely oblivious to the storm about to tear through her life. I wasn't there when she opened them. I didn't need to be. I wanted her to sit in that silence, to feel the first real consequence of what she had done. But the real devastation came later. I told the children. It wasn't an easy decision. No father, real or not, wants to shatter his children's world. But they deserved the truth. And Laura? She deserved to watch as the family she had built on lies turned to ash before her eyes. Ethan was the first to understand. He stared at me, his hands shaking as he looked at the results. Lily cried. Ben, my youngest, my baby boy, refused to believe it at first. I don't blame him. But the truth has a way of sinking in, no matter how much you fight it. And Laura? She broke. For the first time in 15 years, she truly broke. The mask she had worn so effortlessly crumbled, and I saw her for what she really was, not a loving wife, not a devoted mother, but a fraud. A woman who had built her entire life on a foundation of deceit. She begged. She pleaded. She swore she had loved me, that the affair had meant nothing, that I was still the father of those children in every way that mattered. But she knew. She knew the words were empty, that nothing she said could ever erase what she had done. And as I stood there, watching her fall apart, I felt nothing. No sympathy. No regret. Just satisfaction. Because for the first time in 15 years, Laura was finally feeling what it was like to lose everything. And I had made sure there was no coming back from it. There is a strange kind of peace that comes after total destruction. Once the fire has burned through everything, once there is nothing left to save, there is only silence. Laura was gone. The house was mine, the bank accounts secured. The divorce was swift, no contest, no drawn-out battle. She didn't have the fight in her anymore. She left with almost nothing, just a few personal belongings and the clothes on her back. The courts had no sympathy for her. Neither did I. The children, that was the hardest part. Ethan, Lily, and Ben were shattered. Not at me, not at the truth, but at the mother who had lied to them their entire lives. I didn't push them one way or another. I let them make their own decisions. Ethan cut her off immediately. He wanted nothing to do with her. Lily struggled but ultimately distanced herself, unable to look at her mother without seeing betrayal. Ben was different. He was too young, too desperate to hold on to something familiar. He still saw her as his mother, still needed her in a way that Ethan and Lily no longer did. I didn't stop him from seeing her. That wasn't my place. But I knew, in time, the weight of what she had done would crush any illusion he had left. Laura tried to rebuild. She got a job, something beneath her, something that must have stung every day she clocked in. She moved into a small apartment, far from the life she had once known. I didn't care. I never looked back. Revenge didn't bring happiness, not in the way I had hoped. It didn't erase the pain, didn't undo the years of betrayal. But it did something else. It gave me closure. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I could wake up without questioning the life I was living. I could look in the mirror and know that I was no longer a fool. And Laura? She had to live with the consequences of her choices every single day. That, more than anything, was enough. Time moves forward, whether you want it to or not. Months turned into years. The fire of my anger cooled, leaving only the scars behind. Some wounds heal, others remain as reminders of the past. What Laura did to me, to our family, could never be undone. But I had no desire to live in the wreckage forever. I rebuilt. Not just my life, but myself. At first, I didn't know who I was without her, without the illusion of the family I had cherished. My identity had been so tightly woven around being a husband and father that, once the truth was revealed, I was left standing in the ruins, uncertain of what came next. But I learned. I learned to enjoy the quiet. I learned to live without waiting for the next lie to unravel. I traveled. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and found comfort in the simple things: morning coffee on my porch, a book that held my attention, a day that passed without betrayal lurking beneath the surface. The children made their choices. Ethan never spoke to Laura again. For him, there was no redemption, no way to forgive the woman who had lied to him his entire life. Lily stayed distant, polite but detached. Ben was the only one who held on to her, visiting from time to time, though I could see the way it weighed on him. Laura never remarried. I don't know if she tried. I don't know if she ever found happiness again. And the truth is, I don't care. I used to think I needed her to suffer, that I needed to see her broken for justice to be served. But now I realize that she has to wake up every day knowing what she lost. Knowing that she threw away everything for a man who didn't stay. Knowing that the children she carried for 9 months each will never look at her the same way again. That is punishment enough. As for me, I survived. I am no longer the man who blindly trusted, who built his life around someone who never deserved it. I am stronger, wiser, and free. The past is a weight I no longer carry. And for the first time in my life, I am truly at peace.